Hey guys, it's Thomas from the Booze and BJJ podcast. So, this weekend was interesting. We didn't have a live stream. Um, our gym had some Muay Thai fighters. They had some matches tonight, so a lot of people were unavailable, which sucks because it would have been a good conversation. There's been a lot to talk about recently. On that note, so there's been some interesting things happening in the jiu-jitsu world in the last couple of weeks. And I actually took the time tonight to have a conversation on someone else's up and coming podcast. And I'm not gonna plug the podcast right now because honestly I don't know if that conversation went the way that they wanted it to. So, I'm just going to jump into it. So, I had a conversation with this new podcaster, and they were asking me about the incident at NAGA with the transgender ladies who entered, and then the other ladies in the bracket who were biological women ended up withdrawing. And apparently I didn't realize that the incident at Naga apparently has been playing out on smaller scales in other places. Now I know that there were individual transgender women entering here and there, but it sounds like, and I have to look into this because this was a claim that the other podcaster made, that groups of transgender women are entering BJJ competition specifically. And it's just apparently a lot wider spread than I thought. Now, again, I don't know if that's true. I'm going to look into it. That was one of the things that we didn't look into. But my opinion on the subject, and, I've got the article up. I'm not going to read it to you guys. I'll have the link in the description so you can read it yourself if you're not familiar with the situation. But anyways, just a little bit of a recap. So there was a NAGA competition last month, and it was in Georgia. And what ended up happening was several transgender women entered the women's brackets, and there was one point where so many women withdrew from the competition because they didn't want to compete against transgendered women, that the only people who had placed in these brackets were the transgendered women who entered. So there was not a biological woman who placed in several of these brackets. Now, the conversation went that the other podcaster was of the opinion that there were no differences biologically between men and women. And they also claimed that after a duration of time taking hormone replacement therapy, trans women their strength level would equal that of a biological woman, or sometimes be weaker than the biological woman. And I've heard that before, and that was something I didn't really have a chance to look into. So for the sake of clarifying things from that perspective, I suggested that both me and this other podcaster simply just present evidence to back up our points. So my point was a bit more. Let me rephrase that. My point was the opposite of what the podcaster's was. Of those two claims that the podcaster made, my claims was that there are differences between men and women, and that I did not think that hormone replacement therapy reduced the strength of a biological man to the degree that it would make them on an equal playing field as a biological woman. Now, that's slightly different from what their claim was, so it's not necessarily a apples to apples opposite stance, but you get what I mean. So at this point, the conversation became it became unhinged. I'll just put it that way from my perspective. The podcaster kept saying we were having a good conversation, but as time went on, especially when I got to the point where I asked, let's compare notes, let's compare evidence and see what we can see, that's the point where it got really hairy. So, anyways, on the point that there were no differences between men and women, I took the opposite stance. I said there were. I actually pulled up this article it's a sports medicine, what is it? A sports medicine biomedical journal, I believe. I'll put the link to this in the description as well. And this compared physical strength under certain conditions between men and women. And they went over hand strength, back strength. They did a 5 jump test and a squat jump test. And I thought this was very intriguing because I didn't primarily want to focus on upper body strength or lower body strength because generally speaking, men have a significant advantage in upper body strength. And I used to be under the impression that women had an advantage in lower body strength until I read this particular article. Now, just to recap some things, and you can look at it for yourself. For the squat jump and the 5 successive jump test, the difference between men and women was 23 to 34%. That's the strength difference. So men have a 23 to 34% advantage. And that differed between weighted and unweighted. Weighted, of course, was a lower range, but for hand grip strength, men had a 38% advantage. For back strength, men had a 43% advantage. So, going through this article, there were some conditions where the strength advantage was ridiculous, like 40 to 75%. I'm not going to go into that, but we'll just keep these 4 points in mind. So with these in mind, you could roughly say the range, I think it's fair to say that men have a 30 to 40% strength advantage on average. So that definitely caused some contention with the podcaster's first claim, because obviously there is a physical difference between men and women, especially in this article study spells out, especially in terms of strength. Now, let's keep these numbers in mind because it's going to segue into a very big point in the second study, which is this one right here. And this is from, who is this from? I keep forgetting. The British Journal of Sports Medicine. That's right. So this study followed men who had taken estrogen. I believe it was estrogen. It may have been another hormone, GAHT. Well, anyways, I think that's just hormone replacement therapy. Yeah, my mind is going all over the place because I'm a little bit irritated by the conversation I just had with this podcaster. But anyways, so this article, when you start reading it, you will notice one thing. I'll actually read this paragraph to you. The strength loss with 24 months of GAHT, which I think is hormone therapy, also ranged from non-significant to 7%. Taking these strength parameter data collectively and in consideration of cisgendered women, demonstrating 31% LBM, and you'll have to read it to figure what that is. I'm not going to go into it. Lower hand grip strength and 35% lower knee extension strength than cisgendered men. The small decrease in strength in trans women after 12 to 36 months of GAHT suggests that trans women likely retain a strength advantage over cisgendered women, Whether long duration of GAHT would yield further decrements in strength in transgendered women is unknown. So between 12 and 36 months of hormone therapy, the strength reduction in the person taking the therapy would be 0 to 7%. So if we keep that in mind and go back to the first article, if we look at hand grip strength, now originally hand grip strength, the men have a 38% advantage over women. If we take this reduction from hormone therapy, that on the high end, that 7%, men would still have a 31% hand grip strength advantage. With back strength, that 43% advantage gets reduced to 36%. Going into the squat jump and the 5 jump test, the range for that was originally 23 to 34%. If we factor in that 7% difference, it's now 16% to 27%. Those are pretty high. That's a pretty high difference in strength still. So with that in mind, my ultimate stance in this conversation I had with this podcaster was that if transgendered women want to be included, they have to let biological women have the choice of competing with them or not. I think I thought that it was a good compromise, because transgender people aren't going to go anywhere, and this issue isn't going to be resolved anytime soon. So in the meantime, I think that is I think that's an acceptable choice. Think about it. In jiu-jitsu competitions, you have the absolute bracket or division, right? You don't have to enter absolute. In fact, you don't have to compete at all if you don't want to. But for the women who do want to, they should at least have the choice, especially with these strength differences. That's pretty extreme. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. And the thing is, I'm the type of person, if I'm evaluating something wrong, let me know. Tell me. Let's have a conversation about it. But what I'm starting to get irritated with, and let me rephrase, what I'm irritated with in society in general, is when people have a disagreement with something, at least one party gets to a point where they get flustered, they get angry, they can't handle the conversation, or they can't handle or process someone who disagrees with them. If you disagree with me, let's have a chat. I really enjoyed that conversation with that podcaster I had earlier, but it was obvious that they couldn't handle the fact that I wouldn't agree with them, wholeheartedly. And they got mad when I asked, let's compare notes. What are you basing your opinion on? I'll show you what I'm going to base my opinion on. I feel like that's a reasonable thing to do. And again, and I always bring this up, Yana is one of my favorite training partners. She is way smaller than me. And one of the things that makes our training sessions, enjoyable and useful is the fact that I don't use my full strength on her. I don't use my full weight on her. I just use pure technique. And if I use pressure, I use a little bit of pressure. Not enough so that my advantages cause our role to be useless. I could literally just sit there and overpower her again and again and again and again, and she wouldn't learn anything from it. She wouldn't be able to sharpen her technique, and I would be in the same boat. Like, there'd be no point in it. And with that being said, if I were to take hormone replacement therapy, at most, after 12 to 36 months, my strength would only be reduced by 7%. But with the size difference between me and Yana, that's not going to be very much. And even if I were to compete against a biological woman my own size, I would still have a severe strength advantage against her. That would be like me fighting my younger sister who's about my size. it would be pointless. Like I would have a higher chance of winning, yes, but it could also get very dangerous. There was that incident, and I'm proud of this young lady. And we went over this match before, where there was a young lady in yellow spats who went up against a 200-pound transgender woman, and she ended up winning. But when you watch that match, there were points that were extremely dangerous for that young lady. There was the transgender woman definitely tried to use her weight and strength as a advantage and put her in a scarf hold, a kesagatami, in such a way that there was a lot of pressure being put on her neck. And the angle that she was being pinned was very awkward. If something went wrong, her neck could have got injured. And in an absolute nightmare scenario, her neck could have been broken. Yeah, I just wish we could all have these conversations in peace. If this other podcaster ends up posting our conversation, I'll link it in this video so everybody can watch it, and I'll make an announcement. But yeah, go ahead, read the article, read the 2 sources that I cited, and let me know if I'm interpreting something wrong. And if I am, we can have a conversation about it. It doesn't have to be recorded. It can just be between us. So, yeah. That's all I got to say about that. My throat is starting to hurt. I must be losing my voice or something. Anyways, signing off. I'll talk to y'all later.